Hey everybody, this is Ben Hansen from MinnMax, and I'm joined today by Dan Ryckert.
What were you looking at over there?
That is a beautiful camera that you can't see.
Okay, this will play well on the audio.
Yeah, that's right. So if you're watching the video version of this, if you want to listen to the audio version, that'll be in the exclusive Patreon audio feed. So if you're a $5 supporter for MinnMax on Patreon, then you'll get this in audio form, but I hope this video version works for the rest of you. Dan Ryckert, no longer of Giant Bomb.
No, I think the news should be out at this point. No, I don't work at Giant Bomb anymore.
How does it feel, man?
It is too early to know exactly how. I know I'm going to miss Giant Bomb. So as of this recording, we're recording this on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're both very energetic considering. But yeah, the announcement will be recorded tomorrow, and it's going to be going up on Friday the 3rd. Should be the announcement. So I'm assuming you're putting this up in between me leaving Giant Bomb and starting at the new place.
That's
right.
I'm
probably at prime nerves right now.
Well, you didn't seem too nervous about like putting in your 2 weeks or anything. Talking to you about it.
No, actually, I'm more excited than anything. We'll talk about it, but I've had a long time in games, and it's been really, really fun, in a lot of different ways. It's really changed my life, but I'm ready for doing the next thing and taking the next step.
Okay, and so you're ambiguous at this point about what the next step is, but for sure, no joke, you are leaving Games Press.
I am leaving the games press industry. I will not be tied to games anymore.
Okay, and you're going to join the sales team at MinnMax, is that right?
That's correct. I'm going tie shopping tomorrow, so
why?
I do actually have to get like suits and stuff for the new gig.
Wow, that's going to be very exciting. I expect a fashion montage, man.
I got to dress like a big boy now.
You have to finally become a big boy. Congratulations.
At 35 years old. So.
Okay, why are you leaving in general? Like, what prompted this without specifying, the opportunity, but like, why have you wanted to leave Games Press for a while?
Boy, that's a big question. It's not a thing where I was like desperately wanting out of Games Press. My thoughts on video games, my enthusiasm for video games never waned. In fact, even after I'm leaving games, I'm planning on, playing just as much, if not more so, in the future. So I kind of feel like I did the things that I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, from a little kid, I wanted to work specifically at Game Informer. And I did that, and then I started getting more and more into like the podcast and the video stuff and kind of the personality stuff. And so Giant Bomb was like such a clear choice for the next step. And I did all sorts of fun stuff there. I started so many different shows, did so many podcasts, the live events, all that stuff. On 2 different coasts. I kind of feel like I checked the boxes. I wrote 1 million reviews. I did all those podcasts and videos. And at a certain point, it's like you kind of have. I always had these different ideas for videos, whether it was like the roller coaster video or like a Metal Gear Solid or Mario Party series and things like that. And I can keep doing that. I can keep coming up with those. Like we just did that Burgle My Bananas Donkey Kong game show, and I had a blast doing that nonsense. That was great. And so I could keep doing that, but there's not much more I could do outside of you look at other people that have gone from the press and they go into PR, they go into marketing, they go into their basement like you.
It's so cold down here, man.
That sounds all right. So I don't know. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about, I'm sure damn near anyone in Games Press thought about doing their own Patreon at some point, because we've seen enough people break off and be successful. We've seen Danny has done incredible things. Talking to Greg Miller a couple months before he left IGN, and I was at his place, and I think all the other guys were there too. And they're like, "Yeah, we're all going to announce that we're leaving at the same time. We're all going to do this Patreon." And I remember being like, "You're nuts! Like that's bold," and I think that's cool that they had the confidence to do that. But I thought there was no way they would be able to make like a living doing that. And,
I think I have to go back and check the messages, but I feel like one of the last messages before launching MinnMax here was you're like, "I don't think so, man. Like I think this might be a terrible idea."
Well, I keep thinking at a certain point, the Patreon, like gaming personality, like landscape has to kind of get too spread out. I mean, I don't know how many different, $5 or $10 subscriptions people can do a month. And so I keep thinking that, and then people keep launching Patreons and being super successful with it. And, yours is doing great. So like, There was definitely that thought for a while of like, oh, what if I could just do everything I wanted to do and kind of build out a team, and like who would my like dream team be and things like that. Like that is something I thought about a lot over the last year and a half, year or two, I'd say, of just like what that would look like, and it's not like I was restricted at Giant Bomb. I got to do whatever silliness I wanted to do, but I came into an existing brand, an existing place, and like I did very much wonder if I could just start something up, what that would look like. And I have a ton of ideas. I've got documents and all sorts of stuff. Like,
man, this is such a confusing note to start on, because just to be clear, you're not doing this, right?
I'm not. I'm just kind of, look, I got a lot of thoughts going on. I'm in the midst of massive career change and everything.
Boy, do I have plans. Not doing them, but boy, do I got them.
If I were to start a video game Patreon, I would have a ton of ideas ready to go. Just ready to start up on day one.
What's interesting, and I like, even maybe I'm surprised by it, but like I love launching MinnMax. Everything has just been a wild adventure, but it requires a lot more interaction with the community, a lot more reading comments online, trying to gauge, is everybody happy? What can we do? Can we push this way? Let's do some surveys. And I feel like over the last couple of years, you have wanted to get further away from direct feedback on the internet.
Or just less of the internet in general.
Well, it seems like a mistake then for launching a Patreon, which you're not doing.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that would drive me nuts about if I did do a Patreon. Because, I am less interested in recent years in just being, hey, look at me, Dan, which, I think you probably knew me at peak, hey, look at me, Dan. What are you shaking your head about?
Because you're saying, hey, I'm no longer, hey, look at me, Dan. You're just no longer, hey, look at me, Dan, while lighting yourself on fire. Now you're just shooting a firecracker saying, hey, look at me, Dan. You're like, look at this. I'm a changed man.
I'm purposely stepping behind the scenes.
All right.
I'm not going to be. My voice will still be on a podcast if you want to listen to Painting the Stream with me and my lovely wife, Bianca, as we watch streaming services like Hulu and Netflix and talk about it.
Great.
There's my plug real quick.
Great. Can I join you for an episode about that Gary Shandling documentary that you haven't watched yet?
I don't know why you want me to watch that so bad. I've never said anything about Gary Shandling. Except for that one time he was on Conan and looked weird, and I asked if he was healthy, and he wasn't.
That's in the documentary. Because it's like exactly up your alley, man. Like, I know you're not a big Larry Sanders show. You said you've like watched a couple episodes or something.
Yeah.
But just like a good long documentary about somebody just craving attention and ultimately they're very sad inside. It's your life story, Dan. I feel like you'd connect with Gary Shandling in a lot of ways here.
Do you think I'm sad?
No, I don't. But something that I genuinely wrote down is, how much do you feel like you crave attention as a person right now on a scale of 1 to 10?
Boy, is the average person a 5?
Okay, let's see. Well, this is good for everybody else. Let's say my dad is a 4.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Is he on MinnMax? Does he have a show?
Yeah,
he makes cribbage boards once a week.
Yeah. It's failing, but I don't have the heart to cut it.
What tier do I get to see? Ben's dad's cribbage corner. Okay, if he's a 4, maybe nowadays I'm a 5 or a 6.
Really?
I would say I would say when I was at Game Informer and starting to get kind of a following and getting to be on videos and do all that wacky stuff, I was probably like an 8 or 9 at least, I would say. There is something intoxicating about that feeling when it's like all of a sudden, I used to have video game conversations all the time with all my friends. It's all I talked about. And all of a sudden having an audience for that and people enjoying it and like having an outlet where it's like I go to work and we're doing these replay videos and stuff like that. And there is something about getting known for sure. And I don't think it's a healthy thing necessarily to feed off of that and to chase that. I mean, obviously there's just the larger, social media conversation about just general mental health with that stuff. And I've definitely over time, if I had to point to a time, it's probably when I met Bianca, and I think whatever need or whatever that I was trying to fill with social media attention or getting followers and stuff like that, I think I'm just in a much healthier spot as a person, and so maybe I just don't need that as much. But also just the whole tone and tenor of internet conversation, everything is just so I don't like it. So.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's we don't have to dive too much into Bianca and stuff, but like I think it's interesting. Like she's so loving and supporting, but also pays so much attention to you. So it's like, is she just filling that bucket?
I've made her make a bunch of sock puppet Twitter accounts to like everything that I say on Twitter. She's very patient with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I definitely at a time wanted attention, and I got it, and it just got to a certain point where what? What are you laughing
And
at?
I got it. I know it's just a funny message.
Well, I mean, it was just like I remember there was an Onion article once that really stuck with me, and it was something about Kanye West decided that he got all of the validation he needed, and he like moved to like a nice farmhouse in Ohio, and he's just like making snickerdoodle cookies and just like, no, I got to that point and I filled that, I'm good now. I don't need to be public. And it's like, oh, okay. The joke, obviously, that like, no, you'll never actually feed that beast entirely, and it's a silly thing to chase.
So
basically.
what is the right level for even like towards the end of your era at Giant Bomb then? Like what was the right level? Is it just like having fun creating that stuff and then checking Twitter once a day? Like specifically, what do you think is like the right healthy amount there?
I mean, I haven't had notifications turned on Twitter for a year or two, I think. So I really don't see any of that. So
wait, but just like,
I only
you see like people you follow back, right? That type of thing.
Yeah, so it's like, and I only follow like I try to keep it around like 200 people or whatever. So like if you respond to something or Mike Mahardy or something, like I'll see that.
Yeah.
But like I just don't do the thing where it's like I remember you mentioned something once. You walked by my desk at Game Informer, and we all used TweetDeck back then.
Yeah.
And we had all the different columns and everything, and it was like, oh, mentions and your feed and your lists and everything. And you walk by and you're like, huh, I think it's really telling about you as a person that the very first column you put there is mentions.
Oh, I don't remember that, but yeah, that's.
So you thought it was like an ego thing or whatever, and so it's like, yeah, I used to check that stuff all the time, and now it's just like I like having fun. Like when I was doing that Burgle My Banana show, I was just having a blast because it was just this big, dumb, stupid thing, and I got to just yell and play the stupid game. It was fun, but it's not a thing.
But
where
please
it's like,
don't look at me. Don't look at me, ladies and gentlemen. Look, I dress up in a Waluigi suit and throw bananas at people, but please, 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 direct your attention.
I do that exact same thing in my living room with no cameras. I put on my shiny go.
All right, you keep cutting out because Skype is the greatest service known to man.
Excellent.
I'm curious, like, it's funny when you bring up, like, oh, I had a great time trying about making this stuff, and you bring up, like, oh, the roller coaster video or Burgle My Bananas. Like, what do you think stands the test of time? Like, now that you're looking back on everything, basically, like, do you wish you would have done more things? Is just like, does it turn out, just the big swings stand out and everything else gets lost in the fray?
I always did want to do more big things like the roller coaster video, like, because that was an idea I pitched for so long at Game Informer. Like, Andy would just be like, that's dumb as hell. Why would you do that? And I was like, trust me, it'll be funny, because I wanted to go to the Mall of America when I lived in Minneapolis, and I wanted to do that exact same thing. I wanted to see. I would have gone for hours around, and I thought it'd be hilarious if I just like puked on that video. Or
you
whatever.
never. I don't think ever pitched that when I was there. So were you just, when you first got there, you're like, Andy, let me be the video person and take the camera on the roller coaster?
No, it wasn't like an issue meetings or anything, but I remember I pitched, like, we did one of the first things you and I did together was that like RC car thing, where we, the Black Ops car with the camera, and we played through it. And it was around like when I would pitch those types of ideas. And I remember I would like just tell Andy or Reiner, like, oh, hey, I would love to do this video. And that one in particular was always shot down. I don't know if I ever talked to you about the logistics because I never got past the like permission stage. So maybe that just never happened. And so I went to Giant Bomb, and that was one of the first things I pitched. And they were like, yeah, okay, if you can make that happen. And so I get Six Flags on the phone, and I convinced them to let us come in before they opened, and told Drew, and Drew gets all the GoPros and stuff, and it was like, oh, awesome. But logistically, it gets hard with scheduling and stuff like that. Like, I would love to do more and more and more and more of those types of like silly stunt videos. I wanted to do stuff like basically doing like a sequel to that video where I was in the Blue Angels, because the Blue Angels would do Fleet Week in San Francisco and everything. But it's just there's logistical things, there's schedules, especially, at a place like Giant Bomb where it was, we have a pretty strict like, okay, stream Wednesday, stream Friday, got to record the podcast on Thursday. We got to prep quick looks from home on Tuesday, got our meetings on Monday. So it was just kind of hard to get everything together.
Plus, on top of that,
that's no one's fault, really.
Oh, yeah, but then on top of that, it's got to be stressful for you. Maybe you don't care as much, but when you're like pitching all these big things, it's like, let's do this. And like, even if you can pull it off logistically for like lining up with the Blue Angels, then it's like, okay, at the time probably is like, okay, Vinny or Drew or Jason, like, take time out of your schedule to come do this thing for me. And I'm sure you have some idea of like, yeah, it's a lot more just kind of boring, pain in the ass, technical work on the video side. So when you're so dependent on others for wrangling that in, that has got to make it crack every once in a while.
Well, especially when you're working with a small team. And, we have 2 offices and there's just a handful of people at each office. So, if a couple people are out doing a silly video or something, that basically means that office is at a standstill. So
Right.
there's only so much you can do. But yeah, those are the things that stand out, like the big, the roller coaster. There are a lot of like live event things. I think like the most in my element I've ever been was getting to play Mario Party 5 on stage at a comedy club with a live audience, like doing like wrestling chants, like just
Yeah.
getting to really play the bad guy and like. And then I don't know if you saw it, but like basically the most Mario Party nonsense ever happened where I had this like insurmountable lead and then the ultimate good guy, Drew, gets to come back and did some crazy Mario Party nonsense and won at the end. I loved that. It was so fun to just feed off the crowd and just be such a jerk and a bad guy and get my comeuppance at the end. Like that was just so much fun for me. The best thing I did in 15 years of video games was that Peter Molyneux fart video.
All right,
I'm not kidding.
This is not kidding. All right, this is back at Game Informer. I was every time we went to E3 throughout. Well, I think we dodged it a couple years, but the overall idea is every time I went to E3, I wanted to set up just a one-on-one discussion between 2 game developers. And so it was very fun trying to arrange, okay, who could we possibly match together? We'd reach out to one person that we had a decent relationship with and ask them who they'd want to talk to and stuff. And somehow it got lined up for a Sean Vanneman from, at that time, Walking Dead fame. Now he's at Valve. And Peter Molyneux having this hour-and-a-half long discussion, which was just amazing. And it was all lined up and stuff. And then the way I remember it is we're at like, was it THQ parties, like a Saints Row party or something the night before we filmed that?
Right.
And then it's like,
no, I think we were at a Microsoft thing. I think we were in like by that Club Nokia where they would have all those parties in the event space.
That could be. And I remember that you're like, well, we got Peter Molyneux. We got to do something stupid. We can't throw away this opportunity. And I was very much in the camp of like, Dan, this is like a classy, smart video. Just because we have a smart person involved and he'll be filmed on a Game Informer camera does not mean that we need to drop slime on his head.
That's my job. Actually, no one told me that. That's just what I wanted in my job.
So anyway, I think it was just like spitballing ideas. And I don't remember. I think it started just with like, oh, Dan, you want to do fart jokes or something? And then it evolved into, well, let's have him review these fart apps.
Yeah, I think it was probably back in the days of the App Store where there were way more gimmicky things like fart apps and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's the funniest possible thing I can imagine is the most like, well, whether it's earned or not, the guy with the biggest reputation for being like Mr. Intellectual, serious game designer, just talking about the dumbest, most lowbrow stuff. But also he has shown in the past that he has a really good sense of humor.
Love farts.
I explained it to him and he 100% understood what the bit was. Leaned it like, you didn't even have to edit much of that, did you? Like that was just pretty much straightforward.
It was pretty straightforward. I think I still have a video clip of you pitching it to him. And he's not as like gung-ho about it as you are remembering because he's a little bit like, I got to be somewhere soon, Dan. Okay, is basically the tone.
The only part that I felt awkward about was when you brought Sean Vanneman up there and sat him down in that little like hallway, and you had to go get Peter Molyneux. And I had no idea who Sean Vanneman was. And so I was just like, I'm just going to talk about why this fart video is going to be funny. And I remember him just being like, So I still don't know who he is. I know he's a game guy, but I didn't know what to talk to him about.
He is professional.
That's why I always
game
was
guy.
amazed at your ability. And like oh my God, you would sit down with any game designer and just ask a million questions. And you were incredible on those cover story trips. I was always in awe of your ability to ask questions.
And I'm not a game designer. You don't need to know fully how everything works behind the scenes to be inquisitive. Like, you're kind of an inquisitive guy, but for some reason, when it comes to asking questions about video game development, it's like, well, I don't know. Like, the part that I was...
Well,
I don't
that's
understand
the thing
it.
is, like, I have found that because I've been on just so many hundreds of hours of video game podcasts and stuff like that. And like the thing that I love about video games isn't talking to designers or watching documentaries about the making of games or anything like we are the opposites, me and you. Whereas like you, by your own admission, have always been more fascinated with like seeing how the sausage is made and talking to designers and watching documentaries, reading books, all this stuff.
I love the industry almost as much, probably more than games, where you're the flip.
Yeah, it's like I just love playing games.
Yeah.
I have always loved playing games, and that's why all the stuff that I was always pitching, like whether it was replay or videos with like Metal Gear or whatever, it's like I just want to see the games, really.
Right.
I know the names. Growing up, I remember thinking like, oh, Shigeru Miyamoto or Hideo Kojima, it'd be amazing to meet them someday, and it was. I mean, those were highlights of my career when I got to meet these kind of like idols of mine, and got to interview most of them many, many times. But ultimately, it's like I've still never listened to a video game podcast, and you yelled at me all the time for watching that I need to watch whatever what's the documentary you love that you
the
said
Gary
was like,
Shandling documentary. No, no, it's the
Double Fine's Gary Shandling. Yeah, it's a late career move. Yeah. No, it's like that's the thing. It's like I'm sure that's good, and I don't like look down. Like Bianca loves listening to game podcasts, and that's something you've always been fascinated with, like those documentaries and stuff. But it's like they're not for me. Like I watched Indie Game the movie; it was interesting. But I've never wanted to listen to a video game podcast. And likewise, I've never watched streamers. I don't like watching people play games.
Look, there's
unless
no
it's
doubt,
something like
there's no doubt you're ignorant. We got it, Dan.
It's not ignorant.
No,
I
wonder if it's something though with you. I don't know, because I think a lot of people did make this transition, but like you grew up loving game magazines, whereas like I somehow dodged that completely, which is weird because I worked at Game Informer for 9 years. But I grew up with like, GameSpot was like an epiphany to me, right? And then 1UP completely blew my mind and stuff. So I wonder if there's just something more personal or focused on, behind the scenes, or I guess that's kind of like the rise of podcasts overall as well. And so, but you're nostalgic for games, and that nostalgia ties back to looking at a picture of Mario 3.
Yeah, I mean, it was every video game magazine growing up. It was Game Informer was the main one, EGM, EGM2, Insight, and Ultra Game Players, and Game Pro and everything. Like I loved that because it was my way of knowing what games were coming out and reading reviews and deciding like what games to put my $60 down on. It just got me excited about the games themselves. So. And I guess that's what podcasts are like, because, we talk about games when we do the Beastcast and stuff like that. So I guess you could just learn about, I don't know. I just never had an interest. It's just like gaming magazines were everything to me back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would, now that I'm leaving the industry, I do think a lot about like how I am going to, like, I just figure my entire social circle and like so many people I follow on Twitter and stuff like that, like I'm going to hear when games come out. So I think I'll still probably be in the know on that stuff, but I don't think I'm going to start listening to stuff. No.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. Do you feel like it's so frustrating when you were talking about going to Giant Bomb, then you eventually went to Giant Bomb, but you're like, I think I've been on it a couple times. It's fun. I don't know. But you weren't like a hardcore fan of Giant Bomb, and it's somebody who was a big Giant Bomb fan that was so frustrating. Do you feel like now, after all those years inside, do you understand why Giant Bomb has that big of a community? Do you understand what's magical about their output?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Like it's never been that I've not understood why people would like a gaming podcast or anything. It's just, it just wasn't for me. I understand like the personalities were great. Like that's why I was confident in going to Giant Bomb is because, I'd followed those guys on Twitter for so long. And I feel like I got a lot of their sense of humor through that. And especially after, appearing on those like E3 bombcasts and stuff like that, I was like, man, I do love the tone of this. I love how it is this very, it's industry veterans that really know their shit, but they're also like irreverent and not afraid to get stupid and have some fun with it. It was not the straight-laced podcast. Like I 100% understand why people like it for sure.
Okay.
And if I wasn't aware of that, I would not have gone there willy-nilly, sight unseen. So
right. It was really heartwarming when you got to Giant Bomb after a little while. I remember talking to you about it, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I mean, Gerstmann's a genius." And I was really struck by that. Do you remember saying that?
I believe it, yeah.
But that was nice because I'd never seen you have that appreciation, I think, for somebody in the industry before. Maybe like a developer or somebody you would call a genius, but just being like, oh no, Gerstmann actually, like, he is as smart as he seems. And it's amazing to see behind the scenes how his brain is working, just understanding the media landscape a little bit.
I mean, he is like him and Andy are like the two guys that I think have been doing this the longest. Although, like Jeff has always, as far as being super hands-on with everything and part of I know Andy's doing the podcast now, so he's doing more of that now. But like Jeff has been like in the trenches making content, his whole career, and he knows so much about, like, I think he has foresight in the way, like, even making Giant Bomb as personality focused as it was
Yeah.
before personality focused stuff was everything, I think I remember he said one time when I first started something like, because a lot of people would like look down on like YouTubers and Twitch streamers and stuff like that, and he says, like, yeah, people talk about YouTubers now the way people talked about video game websites back in the magazine days, where it's like they kind of like look down their noses at it or whatever, but they shouldn't, because this is like where things are going.
Yeah.
So I think he's always had a really good sense of that. And when I was working on the West Coast, there were plenty of times after work where, I would just be standing around, everyone else is left. And it's just like Jeff and I would just talk. And sometimes it was about just wrestling or whatever. And then sometimes I'd really get to pick his brain about, just content and creating stuff for an audience and scheduling stuff. And he's incredibly analytical and experienced with that stuff in a way that is fascinating to talk to him.
Yeah. In your mind, after all these years, what do you think the audience wants? What do people going to game sites or checking out gaming podcasts, gaming videos, what's the core of it? What are they looking for?
It's just all over the place. I think a key thing is authenticity, because I think you can really, well, that's tough too, because like I think there are a lot of really popular outlets and personalities and stuff that do feel really forced and they don't feel authentic. But it's like the stereotype of the YouTuber that's just like at everything. It's like that doesn't feel authentic. But obviously there is an audience for that. So
maybe it's not authenticity. Maybe it's like, this is weird and maybe too big of a picture thing, but maybe it's intimacy. Like you feel like intimately connected to them, even if they are.
Yeah, that definitely is a thing, and kind of the landscape of gaming personalities right now is they do kind of feel like we see it in like forums and stuff like that and Twitter. Like people get very attached to the personalities that they follow on. I mean, it's probably not just games. I'm sure there are people that listen to like Marvel podcasts or D&D stuff or whatever, and it's just. And even predating the internet and stuff, people always got obsessed with the entertainment. That's like I was obsessed with like Dave Letterman and Conan O'Brien.
Or to be fair, you're also internet. I think maybe it was Tim, but I think it was you. Like I remember you really looked up to like Reiner reading Game Informer. Of like that personality for some reason, that one really speaks to me more than any other ones.
Yeah, and I remember really liking the old interests and dislikes and likes at the beginning of Game Informer, because like that was, in a pre-internet time, that was the way you would get a little window into like, oh, okay, so Andy likes this, but Reiner's the Star Wars guy, so I can't wait to see what he thinks of Shadows of the Empire, stuff like that.
Right.
And I mean, obviously the pendulum has swung in an insane way towards that, because it used to be just like a little tiny blurb at the beginning next to a picture, and it's like, oh, that's what Kato's playing now.
Right.
And now it's just like, well, now Kato's just screaming into his YouTube all the time.
No, I won't put my shirt on.
Deep cut for you Game Informer folks. But no, it's just like it is all that interest, likes, and dislikes segment times a million, where it's just like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And the games are secondary a lot of times because people just get attached to the personalities. If you just want to watch gameplay, there's a million different ways to watch gameplay. Yeah. So people attach themselves to the personalities. So I think the personalities have to be strong. I think rapport is really important, because you can get 4 or 5 people that are individually really strong, charismatic personalities, but if they don't gel with each other, it's just going to be a mess, And I think that's why when I think of some of my absolute favorite times of doing this, it was at Game Informer when I would get on a thing with like you and Tim and just like, like 2 of my best friends, like it just felt like we were just messing around playing games, and we happened to get to do this at our jobs and happened to have an audience that was really into it and everything. So it really was just kind of like a magical circumstance, basically.
Have you learned anything spending so much time with, I think, the best host in the video game biz, which is Vinny, like just for like creating a mood in that room? Like I remember at Game Informer when we're recording podcasts, it's like every once in a while, like when we're clapping in and out so much, like it'd be a little bit like, oh, people wouldn't be in the rhythm, they'd be out of sync. And so at a certain point, I remember talking to Leo about like, hey, when people are coming into this room, we just need to have some uplifting music happening in this room just to try and bring energies up a little bit. Who knows if that works? I have no idea. But if you're just sitting there and waiting for people to get started tech-wise and you're just looking at your phone for 5 minutes, like it's not a good vibe. Have you learned anything about either like pre or post show or even like mid show on the Beastcast about how Vinny does a good job of like rallying the energy in the room?
it's definitely not a thing that's really like talked about or planned out specifically, but like I think the conversational nature of not just, the East Coast and Vinny, but this is also how the West Coast was, where it was like, we're just going to hit record and we're going to go. There's not edits. I was about to say there's no music, but then I learned recently there is actually music on the Beastcast.
Yeah, it's a
but
fun
like,
fact.
it's not like a highly produced podcast. And like, I like the conversational nature of it. The way I think about it is like, so you listen to Conan's podcast, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I listen to that too. And so like the difference between if Conan has Paul Rudd on the show, which I haven't really seen the new format that much, so maybe this is let's picture 2000, Late Night with Conan O'Brien on NBC. He has Paul Rudd on. Maybe a bad example because Paul Rudd was an amazing guest with that ongoing bit and everything, but you know what I mean.
Uh-huh.
So he has Paul Rudd on. It's this kind of a 6-minute segment where a segment producer backstage asks him like, okay, what's an anecdote or whatever? What's the little thing we can do? Conan kind of knows what to expect. They're going to play the clip. They're going to plug the movie or whatever, and then they're gone. Versus Paul Rudd on the podcast is like, an hour or two of them just, shooting the breeze. And it feels so much more conversational. And it feels like you're just kind of listening in on a conversation between two friends who are very interesting in their own rights.
Yeah. And
versus
this is a weird
packaged NBC product.
For sure. And this is the weird rabbit hole too. But like, it's fun to hear. The most fun thing about that Conan podcast is hearing him like be impressed by the reaction. Cause, he's been grinding this out on TV for decades. And now he just records one conversation as the easy, well, probably not easy, and it's still edited and stuff here and there. But still, like, he launched it out there. And I bet the amount of feedback that he's getting for the podcast versus the average episode of the show is just incomparable. I'm sure it's blowing his brain.
But also, he says that he doesn't he doesn't look at feedback or read reviews or anything. So maybe he isn't aware of that. He's just surprised when like the producer tells him like, "Oh yeah, we got a gajillion downloads." It's like, what? Why are people doing that?
Yeah, but I'm sure people on the street or something like I bet a lot of people will like relate to him like, "Hey, love the podcast," more than
if I saw him now, that is what I would bring up for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel like looking at GameSpress, you've become an old man, or just overall, like on the internet, do you feel like it's a factor in GameSpress, but obviously the internet overall about just like the outrage culture machine is horrifying if you really stop and think about like, why am I checking this every day? I'm just looking for a reason to be outraged. I just need to scratch that itch.
Yeah, it's another one of the reasons that I kind of backed away from that stuff as time went on. Is it's just like, I don't know what it is about games, but it seemed like there was just constantly some sort of giant thing going on, like a giant serious thing that when it was brought up on podcasts and stuff, I would sometimes feel out of my depth because it's like, and that's why I would get quiet during like more serious stuff, is because like, whoa, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable speaking, extensively on a serious subject. That's not what I wasn't like a political science major,
But don't you think that's a good opportunity for you to learn too? If it's like, oh, the industry keeps talking about unionization. All right, do I have to learn about this?
Well, that's the thing is like I didn't just put my head in the sand and not pay any attention. I wasn't just la la la. I wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
I would look up stuff and I'm aware of things going on and everything, and I have my thoughts on it and everything. But I just never saw that as my strength, was speaking with confidence about serious issues that people have very strong feelings about. I always saw myself as a guy who played a billion video games and knows a lot about them and can sometimes be funny while playing them. And so that's why I tended to just like talk about the games, go into silly email questions and stuff like that. Like that's the stuff I felt confident in.
Yeah.
And I totally understand why people in whole like podcasts and outlets and stuff kind of build their brand on like, hey, we're going to like take a serious analytical look at this industry and talk about the problems with it. And like, I totally understand why that exists. I'm not the like, oh, why are they talking about this serious stuff? Like, I'm not that. I just never felt that I was the guy. Like, why would I be the guy that anybody would listen to on stuff like that? I'm so not an expert on these things. But if you want to talk to me about, Quackshot or something, I'll talk your ear off.
Yeah. So speaking of Quackshot, like at Game Informer before I left, we started releasing like old classic episodes of Replay because Leo counted them up. It's something like 70 or something that weren't on YouTube. And it's like, we should probably get those out there. It'd be fun to kind of take that stroll on memory lane too. And so we started pumping them out there. And it's so insane to go back and listen to those early recordings and how flat everybody is and how flat you are. Do you think that was nerves? And I'm just wondering, like, this is, again, a very, very stupid question, but like, what is the takeaway from hearing how you sounded back then versus how you sound on mic now? Is it just, oh, get comfortable, you idiot? Or is it a factor of like, oh, I've just inherently learned that I have to be on a little bit more of a roller coaster ride with my voice?
It was never something that I thought about.
Yeah.
But it's unavoidable if you look back, like that first replay, that Twisted Metal one, which by the way is 10 years ago this month.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's amazing going back to that. And I think when I was like writing my anxiety book, I talked about how if you go back, you can tell I'm very nervous and everything. And so I watched it back then and I was like, oh man, like what did change, you know? Because I am comfortable now on mic and on camera to an extent, I'd say. But it's never something I thought about. It's not oh, I got to review the tape and I sound flat or whatever. I need to try to like, enunciate more or anything. I think it's just a thing. I've always felt that if you just do something enough, you're going to get better at it. And when people would write to me when I was at Game Informer and ask like, oh, how do I, do this? How do I make it into the business? I just said my advice was always write and write and write and write and write. It doesn't matter if it's for a blog that has nobody reading it or you don't even put it on the internet. Like if you just do it enough, you're going to naturally get better at it. I think that applies to just about anything. And so it's the whole, like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour thing, it's that thing. And I think there is something to that for sure, because I never thought about it. I just kept doing it. And we did replay every single week. I started doing podcasts more and more. Everything from like doing live events. I was absolutely terrified the first time I did that. Now I can do those without much issue. Flights. I used to have a really terrible fear of flying, and then I started flying more with Game Informer. I got better about that. So it's just doing it. That's the thing.
Do you think, talking about advice for getting into the industry and writing and all that stuff, which I'd imagine now it's changed, but do you feel like you've been lucky? Because you're a hustler more than I think you talk about. You get out there and you connect some dots on your own, but how lucky do you feel like you've been in your life?
I know people don't like hearing this sometimes, but like no. I just don't believe in luck. I mean, you can be fortunate, like if I was in a situation where I grew up and, we didn't have the money to afford game consoles and stuff like that, then I never would have been able, again, bring up Malcolm Gladwell again. You talked about how like Bill Gates, when he was growing up, he had access to this computer, and which when he was growing up, it was very difficult to have regular access to a computer. And if he hadn't had that, he wouldn't have become the richest man in the world, So if I would not have been able to play video games and stuff as a kid, then, but at the same time, I was mowing lawns. I was earning the money, and I was, every time there's a new console, I would trade in the old one and all the games. I mean, being fortunate is being lucky, isn't it? Wouldn't you say that Fortune from Metal Gear Solid 2 is a lucky lady? Well, I don't know. I'm still confused about whether that device did anything at the end.
It didn't, Dan. She didn't need it at all. Weren't you paying attention?
Oh, right. The bullet still did the thing. Yeah. That doesn't make any damn sense. Maybe that guy's been a hack all along. Anyway.
Oh, maybe my life has been a lie.
No, I've been fortunate in that I've had a life that and again, we were never it's not like I was raised from a place of I wasn't like a rich kid or anything like that, but I was able to get video games and stuff like that and get jobs as a kid and afford that stuff. And I had a passion for them, and that's why I just dove all the way in. And I don't think luck factors in really.
I think it does, but at the same time, I think it's interesting because I'm sure you're not aware of this, or maybe you are, but the common refrain about you from everybody is always like, oh man, when Dan's around, crazy stuff happens. Just wild coincidences happen. He's able to line up all these things. It's just things fall into his lap, which I think is partly true. But at the same time, I think the part that I'm obsessed with you about, I've ever told you I'm obsessed with you, but the idea of you, you try and you go out to make these connections. People are like, what? Dan, Taco Bell wedding? That's insane. Of course he's lucky enough to have that happen. It's like, well, how many of you applied for a Taco Bell wedding? It's like you're trying and you're making connections even if a strong percentage of those don't happen. Whenever something does happen, oh yeah, it turns out you can just go, if you're lucky enough, I would say, to be associated with Giant Bomb, to go record something on a roller coaster. But it's just people aren't reaching out in general in life, even outside a career or trying to make wacky YouTube videos, just in terms of I wonder if I could connect this. I wonder if I could connect this. What if I made this person talk to this person? How would that affect me?
Well, that's the thing is you have to be able to make the long shots and understand that there's a good chance those things aren't going to pan out. And so for every one of those that did pan out, what was the example we just said? The Taco Bell wedding or whatever.
Yeah.
There were plenty of things that when I was in college, I was making a sketch show. I thought it would be funny we did a recurring thing where we had a big shark mascot suit, and I would film from a big class, and I would have the shark run through and disrupt the class, and then it was a very jackass type thing. And then Bill Clinton was doing a speech at KU at one point, and I thought that would be hilarious if we did one of those bits, and then we like pulled the thing off to reveal it was Bill Clinton all along in the shark suit. And I reached out to Bill Clinton's people, and I like got on the phone with Bill Clinton's office and had conversations about like, hey, we just need 5 minutes to have Mr. Clinton, put on the shark suit, and we'll take it off, and like, I can send you tapes of the show if you want to see what it is, make sure it's something agreeable, and like that conversation was happening, but like I think a lot of people would just be like, that'd be hilarious, but like they wouldn't try.
Right.
Like going back to I think the whole reason I was able to get into this industry is the thing where I called GameStop corporate when I was 18 and told them I would shoot a commercial for them for free if they would fly me up to Minneapolis so I could talk to the Game Informer guys and, ask for like career advice and stuff like that. Like, I don't think a lot of people would take that step of actually trying that
because it seems insane.
Yeah, I'm some 18-year-old guy that lives in Kansas. Why would they let me shoot a national commercial for them and fly me out? And like when I was standing in the Minneapolis airport, I was still like, I turned to my friend who they also paid to fly out, and I was like, how did this work? Why did this work? And so I think enough of those things worked early on in my life that like I've just always wanted to take the long shots, and I've never gotten mad or upset or disappointed when they don't happen because like those things typically aren't supposed to work that way.
But if you're just always reaching outside of your comfort zone a little bit, even just through emails, it's not insane just to try and connect things. Yeah. Well, also, I think the reason that might have happened is because sometimes GameStop makes poor decisions, you could say.
Great sound business decisions that will keep them prospering into the new century.
Okay, we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole either, but I am curious, like, I am fascinated by, there was a thread on Resetter a while ago, and it said, like, if you were the CEO of GameStop, what would you do? Which I do think is, like, it's always like, oh yeah, GameStop. At the same time, it's like, it's an impossible spot. Like, seriously, what would your plan be if it was like, you're waking up tomorrow? And by the way, we should announce right now that you are waking up tomorrow as the new CEO of GameStop. That is your new position.
Yes, I wasn't ready to announce, but I guess we're doing it.
No, but what would you do, honestly?
God, honestly, at this point, I think it's like a Blockbuster situation. I think it's just like times have changed. Unless they change the core business model of what that place is, I don't know what you do about those brick and mortar stores.
Yeah.
They've tried being a Funko Pop dispensary for a good 5 years now, and that hasn't really helped them. Physical games aren't coming back. They can't change that. And I mean, that's the entire business model, is selling games, physical games, So I don't know what they can do. I don't think, they've tried to do like the geek culture thing with like aligning with Think Geek and selling a bunch of like, Funko Pop type stuff, but like that has not sustained. And so what else are you going to do with those brick and mortar stores if your whole identity and brand is like, oh, we're for gamers, Like, I kind of think they're at the end of the rope, and I think they've seen this coming for the longest time. I remember when I was there, they were doing all that stuff where like, we're going to start these Simply Mac stores, and we're going to buy and sell used Apple devices, or we bought Congregate, like a Flash portal, like, like maybe that's a way that we could survive in the game space, and I don't. They tried publishing. Remember that weird Song of the Deep? Whatever.
Song of the Deep. They had Deformers from Ready at Dawn. They got like huge indie studios out there. Yeah. And they had like the merch for Song of the Deep in the store. Like, it's such a weird bubble. They're trying. It's just not that they're removed from all judgment, but it is that thing of like, oh, it's easy to bash GameStop and I'm happy to do it most days. But then at the same time, it's like, I don't know what I mean, there's no like, you idiots, obviously this is the answer, but
I think they have been a doomed company for a very long time, which is not their fault. That is just, time and technology changing.
Yeah.
But I think where you can fault them is just kind of the coldness and the way they have gone out kicking and screaming, and not doing right by their employees and, Game Informer and stuff like that. So, yeah, never had any real love for GameStop. Funko Land, on the other hand,
that was paradise.
Love Funko Land. I love working there was great. I was there during the changeover. I remember taking the sign down and changing it to GameStop.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was there from like 2000 to 2003 or 2004 or something like that. So that's right when they were like scooping up all the like EB and Babbage's and Software Etc. and everything. So
yeah. No, that's what a time capsule. All right, so MinnMax, I'm sure you're aware of this, but like at a certain point, it's like, okay, it was a lot of ideas, probably a lot of ideas you've had as well. And then you have to like start boiling things down and try and figure out like, yeah, what is this? Like, what is the umbrella that everything can be under here, which is kind of tricky. But one of them that I came to pretty early on is like, oh, let's just call it like, so MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better, which is like, okay. And it's nice to like, just that one note in my Google Doc that I communicated in the pitch video that like, oh, the community is like picking up with, and like they're seeing that as like the overall emphasis as well. This is all to say, what are you working on, Dan? How are you trying to get better these days? You like bragging about new Dan. You never shut up about new Dan. I
think I said it once on a video, and then the internet just said that a bunch.
Yeah. That's why I remember it too, buddy. All right. But what's the next level of Dan outside of escaping the public eye and wearing a suit and tie?
I'm going to be living in a place that has a gym in it, so it's going to be a lot easier to get in the gym. Honestly, it's the same stuff that I've always known that has been really helpful for me, like mental health-wise, is working out, meditating, actually just staying on top of that stuff. And because there are times where you start feeling better, and then it's easy to lapse on that stuff, and then all of a sudden you start feeling worse. And just trying to learn how to get better at those things, like working out and stuff like that, like, when you first start, you don't know what the hell you're doing. I still don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I want to.
This is very basic again. How much do you feel like working out on a regular basis changes your mental health? Outside of meditation, which I know is very important to you, but just like, I was just having this stupid epiphany the other day where I was like, I'm not, I have a good metabolism and stuff, so I never worry too much about my weight. I do actually, but that's a whole other saga. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I should probably, just for my mental health, exercise a hell of a lot more. I just don't think of it if I'm not struggling with my weight in a big way.
I think it's huge. I think it's huge to have a little bit of time every day to where, it's obviously got the physical benefits and things like that. And physically, it's something I just need to do because, like, diet-wise, I've always been all over the place, and I love garbage food and everything. And, like, I would be, 400 pounds if I didn't work out the way I do. I have a gut. I'm not some, like, Adonis of fitness or anything like that, but
calm down, Internet. He's not an Adonis of fitness.
I know. That's why I'm leaving the public eye. I'm tired of people calling me an Adonis. Leave a man his privacy. Jeez. No, it's huge. It's able to I even don't like to listen to podcasts typically when I'm working out because I feel like that goes like all the different input you get between watching TV and listening to podcasts and playing games and all the feedback and stuff like that. I think it's important to have times in your waking experience where you're just kind of zoning out or just focusing on one thing. And like meditating, you do for 10, 20, 30 minutes a day or something like that. But like being in the gym for like an hour and a half, I just listen to music instead of podcasts because you can kind of zone out while you're listening to music, which I find with podcasts that requires a little more attention. So I think it feels really good to like get on a treadmill for a few miles and just kind of zone out and not think about anything, because I've always had a really overactive mind. And I like to kind of shut it up as much as I can, really. So, and working out really helps with that. I'm just focusing on something, or if I'm lifting or something, just like focusing on the reps or something like that, instead of just constantly shoving information and stimuli into my face.
But I don't know, you call it stimuli, but I think a lot of people do cope with depression or anxiety by listening to podcasts. I think that is a very common trend. Is like, I just don't want to be alone with my thoughts. I'm just going to keep listening to this.
I mean, there's a million ways to do it that are, totally valid too. But like, there are also people that cope with it by scrolling through a Twitter feed for, 6 hours a day,
exactly.
or just constantly scrolling through stuff. And so it's a matter of finding moderation, finding out the things that work for you and are healthy for you. Obviously, there's no one right way or wrong way about it. So I don't know. For me, working out's definitely been a big one for mental health.
Yeah. Any regrets?
Oh,
what is that? What were you doing?
Bianca's here. Bianca, say hi to the people.
Hi, Bianca. Looking back on your entire time in Games Press, big regrets? Are there big things you'd like a do-over on?
I wish I would have been able to do, I guess, more big, silly, stunty type videos. Because again, that like coming in hot to Giant Bomb with that roller coaster video and everything, that was like this moment of like, this is the stuff I want to do. I want to do big, wacky, attention grabbing stuff. And like, and I thought it was really helpful business wise too. Cause like, a big stunty video like that gets, a lot of like mainstream outside of games places picked it up. Like the AV Club and stuff posted that.
Oh, really?
And, other game sites were linking to it. And, it's like, which doesn't really happen. It's not like Kotaku's not running articles about like a thing Game Informer did, unless it's a cover story or something, But I was seeing that pop up everywhere, and so that's getting more eyeballs on Giant Bomb and bringing new people into the fold. So it's like, oh, if they like that, and oh, I think these guys are funny. Oh, they have a podcast. Okay, I'll listen to that too.
Right.
So I wanted to do more of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But without diluting it too much, because if you do something like that every week, it's something that Conan said that always stuck with me, is that I was reading an Entertainment Weekly article about him and how he was able to kind of get over that hump of the early years and everything. And he's like, I think we know when to not do a bit, where it's like a lot of other places, if they had a success like Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. This was like after the, remember the famous Star Wars line thing that Triumph did? Yeah, so after that, Conan said something like, I think a lot of shows would it's like, oh, it's the weekly, it's Wednesday, it's Triumph time, and until people are just sick of it, basically. And so he knew when to kind of trot that out and not make the audience sick of it and retire like a Pitbot 5000 or something before it's like, oh, this shtick again,
Yeah. Where
I think other shows like like SNL has maybe been guilty of running a character into the ground too much. So yeah, that's all to say that I didn't want to do that with the stunty stuff and just like every week be like, oh, okay, what's Dan trying to do with the wacky thing? Oh, he's can he sit on a toilet and play Wii tennis? I don't know. Like that's a terrible idea for a bit.
It's no good, man. No wonder you're completely out of ideas. You got to get out of this industry. It's the best I got, Jeff. I swear.
I don't think it's anyone's fault that I didn't get to do more of that stuff because, again, there was a schedule. People expect a weekly podcast, and that's how you lose a following and a viewership and things like that is if you aren't consistent. You got to do that podcast every week. If they're a paying premium member, they expect Unprofessional Fridays every Friday. It's the Wednesday stream, the quick looks. You got to cover all these games. So, like, there's a schedule, and it's hard. That's why I think it's no one's fault, really, but I wish I would have been able to do more stuff like that.
Yeah, I hear you. The schedule's interesting, and like it's fun to do the random stuff. At the same time, it's like I always would just think now at MinnMax and also during my time at Game Informer, like how would people recommend this? It's like they might say, oh, if you keep creating that type of video content, it's like, oh, you should check out Jive Bomb because they do a lot of crazy stuff. Like one time they were on a roller coaster, or like it's always tough where it's like, oh yeah, you need these regular buckets to be like, oh, you should check out MinnMax because they do these really in-depth game clubs. Just trying to have something to hang your hat on is something that is easy to miss when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, there needs to be identifiable things because in a time where everyone's got a YouTube channel and there's a million different like Patreon and YouTube outlets and stuff like that are just all some variation of like, here's a bunch of people with microphones talking about video games.
Yeah.
What is the hook without seeming gimmicky, And so I like doing like limited run series and stuff like the Mario Party stuff because it's like, okay, there's 10 Mario Party games at the time of me starting that. And it's like, that could be our hook is that we subject ourselves to the full 50 maximum turns on every one of these. And like, that's an interesting hook, I think. And then there's also enough. Mario Party was honestly one of my favorite things to do. Actually, I just got back from the holidays, and me and my sisters got a 64 and got the old Mario Parties and played many turns of old Mario Party. And I genuinely love those games.
Did you ever play some of like those weird, not offshoots, but related games? Did you ever play like Fortune Street? Wasn't that Squares?
I never played much of that one.
Okay.
I don't know why I didn't play that one, because I would like always try out like Crash Bash or Sonic Shuffle or all those things. So, I don't know why Fortune Street never really landed on my radar. That was on Wii, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I have no idea why.
Would you ever come back to Games Press?
I would never say no to anything. Like I said, I'm not going to tone down my love of games or as much as I play them. I think it's going to change the way I play games going forward. But yeah, it's not like I'm fed up with games or tired of it or have any negative feelings about it whatsoever. I mean, my earliest memories are playing the NES, and just throughout my entire life, that has been the absolute constant is video games. So yeah, I mean, I never say never to anything like that, like I said, I got documents full of ideas. I'm ready to hit the ground running.
Well, if you panic and you just need to get some attention on the internet, you're always welcome to Skype into MinnMax whenever you'd like, or come out to Minnesota and do something in the studio.
I would love to do that stuff. I always loved when I was back in Minnesota and I'd get to come in and do like a guest replay thing or something like that. And who knows, once I'm set up in the new place and everything, maybe some months go by and it's like, man, just for old time's sake, it might be fun to load up a Twitch stream or something and just stream and see who wants to watch or whatever. Not in any effort to like, get big or, get a bunch of followers or anything necessarily, but just I've had a lot of fun streaming video games, and some games can be really conducive to like, having the chat there. And I could see a world in which that happens, and I do have freedom to appear on podcasts and write books or whatever I want to do, at the new place. So, I would love to pop up on MinnMax, or, I'll keep doing Panning the Stream with Bianca. And I'll have some outlets if I'm craving attention.
If you're streaming yourself, though, you realize you have to solve your own technical issues. You can't just go, Vinny, help me.
I don't think you remember. I was the video guy at Game Informer before you.
Video guy. The one time where the lens fell off and you panicked. What was it? Infamous 2? Was that the cover story?
No, that was Halo Reach, and I think I was having a panic attack, and I remember just like the lens came off, and I remember just holding both parts and looking at Matt Miller because they were interviewing Marty O'Donnell, and so like Miller was just kind of like talking to Marty because like I was setting up the tripod and stuff, and so he's just kind of like.
And Miller's notoriously very short-winded, so you didn't have much time.
I know, he hated talking about Halo. So, it just fell apart, and like eventually Matt looked over at me like, "Are we ready to go?" And I'm just holding both parts of the camera, and he had to put it back together. You ever talk to Jeff Cork about the airplane video with him and Megan Murray?
Oh yeah, he shot a whole thing, and then what happened? Nothing worked?
I think it went up. Yeah, I think they thought that I was like a professional video guy when they hired me.
Because you put it on your resume.
Okay.
This is Jeff Cork's argument. I don't want to. We don't need to go into it. It's
everything I said is 100%. I had won awards. I ran a sketch show. I'm good at editing.
You heavily implied that you were a good hire for video, and then you got there and like, I don't know how this works.
Well, to turn into Scooby-Doo. No, and to be fair, I was good at video. I'm good at a lot of aspects of putting out video content. It's just I had always been on the like consumer level when I was doing all those old shows and stuff. I would buy a $400 mini DV camera from Best Buy and then shoot all that stuff and edit in Premiere or Final Cut. And so I get there and Nick Ahrens hands me this like pro level camera with like, man, I just learned how to white balance. I don't know what half of these buttons do. So I do not feel bad about that. I did not misrepresent myself one bit.
Okay. All right. Do you have any advice for MinnMax other than telling Jeff to shut up?
I mean, I think you guys know what you're doing. You've all been doing this for a while. Bianca at MinnMax is great, right?
That's not
Loves it.
That's what I was looking for. Confirmation from Bianca that MinnMax is great.
I mean, I just trust you. You were always good at you have such an amazing curiosity for games, but also this like love of fun. And I have all the faith in the world that you will be able to get that through in your content.
That's very sweet. And I have some faith in the world that you'll do a fine job at the new job.
Thank you. I'm very excited about the new job.
I look forward to it kicking your ass in a way, in a positive, friendly way. Like I think it'll be a really intense leveling up, as they say.
It is, because I think about, even though I've done a lot of work at Giant Bomb and Game Informer and stuff, it was of a certain type. Like Giant Bomb was always so conversational, and it didn't require a lot of like heavy production type stuff. And I'm probably going to announce it very soon, but like I'm going to be moving into something that's going to be a lot of juggling different things, a lot of behind the scenes work, more travel. And honestly, I was just talking to Bianca about this today. Like, I'm excited for that. Like, I wasn't bored with Giant Bomb or video games, but like I wasn't feeling challenged anymore. And for a long time, there was challenges. There was like getting used to being on the mic and making my writing better and things like that. And at a certain point, it's just like, well, for the things this job requires of me, I think I'm pretty good at these things. And I was not feeling challenged. And so like, I'm extremely excited about, this job kicking my ass. Like I want to be tested, and I want to rise to that,
Yeah. Very exciting. Well, hey, best of luck to you, man.
Thank you. This was fun.
For sure.
Best of luck to you.
All right. Skype in at any point. You're welcome to choose a game club in the future if you want to talk about any game of your choice, man.
Excellent. Yeah, I will take you up on that for sure.
All right. Sweet. Good luck, dude. Good talking to you. From in-depth game club discussions with the community to live streams every single week, weekly podcasts, exclusive videos, everything under the sun is at patreon.com/MinnMax2Ns. Check it out, everybody.